I'm not going to lie to you. The first time that someone said that to me, like, we can't change people's personality, I think I was like in a little bit of shock. And because I was like, hold on a second. Are you telling me that if someone showed up to work in a professional office setting in their pajamas, that we would say, well, they're just super chill people. That's just their personality? No. No, that's not what we would say. Hey there, my name is Vanessa Kaiser. I'm a ranch girl turned social worker turned business leader turned entrepreneur. I love to explore all things organization, leadership, growth, inspiration, and efficiency. There's a phrase we use a lot around here called rhythmic living, which I define as the continuous cycle of assessing what season of life we're in and how we create habits, routines, and processes that support our current season. This show is for business owners, leaders, mamas, aunties, sisters, and friends who want to grow and live inspired. Welcome to the Inspiring Heights podcast. Going toe-to-toe with a team member, a colleague, a boss, friends, or family can honestly give me the willies. I don't love conflict, and if it were healthy and productive, I would just avoid it altogether. I'm one of those people who can typically help whisk conflict away like Mary freaking Poppins. I can dance around it, work around it, walk around it, and honestly even think around it if need be. But I've learned through a good bit of trial and error that conflict is not only a natural part of life, it's also a productive and necessary part of life if growth, connection, and efficiency are of any interest to us. There are a handful of people in my life who have really helped me to grow in my ability to lean into conflict in a healthy way. And I thought it would be inspiring and thought-provoking to bring them onto the show for a conflict management series. In this 3-part series, you will hear conversations about how to manage conflict well, paying attention to our emotions during conflict, entering into conflict with people in authority over us, leading our teams through conflict, and more. I am so excited for you to hear these conversations. It is my hope that if you are someone who doesn't like conflict, or maybe you're someone who likes it a little too well and has a reputation for being a bit of a bull in a china shop, that you'll find some good wisdom and good inspiration from these humans. I am all about finding ways to make life a little easier. Finding tools and processes that bring efficiency is something I am majorly obsessed with. When I first started to see freeze dryers pop up on the internet, I brushed them off. Too expensive, too big, and honestly, besides freeze-dried bananas, what would we even use it for? But as time went on and I seen all the super cool things that internet friends were doing with their freeze dryers, like preserving an overabundance of farm fresh eggs or making soup in a jar that only needs hot water to be a delicious and nutritious meal on a busy night, getting a freeze dryer started to really pique my interest. So this last December, we went all in. And I will tell you, this is one purchase I have absolutely zero buyer's remorse for. The freeze dryer has been an incredible way for us to buy in bulk, i.e. saving money, because I don't have to worry about things going bad before we get them eaten. It has also allowed me to take batch meal prepping to a whole new level. You guys, I can literally buy a 20-pound bag of onions, sit down, cut them all at once, freeze dry them, and not have to cut another onion for literally months. I think sometimes freeze dryers are seen as a homesteading trend only. And I'll admit, I kind of thought that at first too. But as I've gotten acquainted with this incredible tool, I can honestly say that it is something that most everyone could benefit from having in their home. From batching meal prep ingredients to creating entire meals for your family that only require water to be ready to gobble down, Harvest Right freeze dryers can truly help make life a little easier. If a freeze dryer sounds like a solution that you need in your home, I have great news. Now through May 21st, Harvest Right is running a gigantic sale. Just head over to affiliates.harvestright.com affiliates.harvestright. That's affiliates.harvestright, harvest, harvestright.com/2639 to check it out. In case that's hard to remember, I will link all of this for you in the show notes. All right. Welcome back to the Inspiring Heights Show. 2 in a row. Do you feel special?
I feel special.
Or like I should be paying you. I'm not sure which. Oh, that's funny. No, I'm so excited that you are here. So in the last episode, we talked about the importance of healthy conflict, and I feel like we really dove into that related to kind of all aspects of life, right? Parenting, marriage, and work. But in today's episode, I want to dive into deep-rooted conflict. So that kind that isn't super healthy. It doesn't arise in one conversation of disagreement, but is really cultivated in the culture of unresolved and ongoing conflict. And so I want to start us at the beginning. Setting that stage, what actions and mindsets do you think lead to a culture of unresolved conflict?
Wow, that is such an interesting question. My personal experience with like kind of deep-rooted conflict in organizations, in work settings, in homeowner association settings, in church settings, is that it typically leads back to one individual. And I almost feel hesitant saying that because I don't want deep-rooted conflict to be that way, right? Like I want to be able to say it's something within our culture. It's something that we all do, or some issue that we all have. But it's sort of, in my experience anyway, has kind of always led back to one person. And looking at the heart of that person, which is really hard to do when you're in the midst of trying to figure out why this entire neighborhood or this entire team of people or this entire church staff are all falling apart. It's really hard to see it when you're in the midst of it. But now being out of some of those and looking back, I can see that in the situations that I've been in that I've had it's been one person who has either a deep hurt or a deep sadness that has basically been, these walls built up, and that it's just created this space where they either need to be in complete and total and utter control of everything, and in the midst of that are destroying relationships and destroying entire teams, or there's a giant pride issue, maybe even to the point of of narcissism potentially, but a giant pride issue where no one can do stuff as well as they can. So there's a ton of micromanaging, a ton of redoing things that someone does, a ton of making decisions over the top of decisions that have already been made. And then when one person is doing that, and then it can lead to everyone feeling discouraged, and then people are fighting with each other. And it results in this giant, huge culture of chaos and conflict. When if you dig deep enough and start pulling the things out, in my experience, it typically leads back to one person who is causing substantial issues.
Wow. That is so insightful. When I was contemplating this question, I've never thought about it quite like that. I've definitely been in situations where I can easily identify that. I just didn't think of it through that lens. I like what you said, that they've experienced pain, and that pain is then coming out in kind of these really swirly ways that's leading to unhealthy conflict, because I feel like that helps to give us empathy in the middle of something really, really challenging, right? When we are in the middle of that conflict and we have identified that person and we're just super frustrated, looking at them through the lens of what have you experienced in your life that has led you to act and behave this way, right? It gives us a lens of empathy, I think.
It does. I think that empathy is to some degree important, but also in my experience, it drives us to our knees, at least people who are Christians, like, because there's nothing that we can do to fix it. It's something that only God can fix within that one person, who's causing all the chaos. I think there are things that we can do to help with culture and the the conflict and chaos that's a result of that. But that one person and the heart issues that they're walking through, there's nothing we can do about that, because for one thing, most of the time they don't let us get close enough or in enough to know any of that, right? There's all these walls and you can't break through them. A lot of times they won't enter into any sort of relationship with anyone. But, I mean, it's like a job for the Holy Spirit for that individual. It's so hard. It's so hard.
It is. Yeah. It is really hard. Yeah, it is. I'm thinking about a particular situation that we've walked through here in the last couple of years, and I can definitely resonate with that. I also think that two kind of big components I've seen to this are just an overarching fear of conflict, which I think lives at the top of underlying mistrust. So, I think in the last episode, we talked about entering into conflict with those who are in authority over us, and how when you have been able to build a relationship with them, it really helps to set the foundation for entering into conflict well, because you know that you're entering into a safe space. But I think that when a culture of an organization or a church doesn't have the foundation built correctly, and there's a warp in the middle of it where there's like some mistrusts, which can come from a whole lot of things. It can come from someone not keeping their word. It can come from someone struggling to be consistent in how they approach people or conflict or decisions. It can come from people who flip-flop back and forth just depending on who they're talking to. There's like kind of all of these things that I think sometimes can lead to this underlying mistrust, but then on top, we're like, it's not safe for me to enter into conflict. We haven't created that space, and so I'm just going to not. But you better believe as soon as we're done with this conversation, I'm going to go tell someone about it and how frustrated I am. And by the way, I'm mad at you, but I'm not going to tell you that. And then we know what happens when that happens, right? Because then it is chaos. And anyone who maybe wasn't sitting around the table when these conversations were being had, that is then brought in later, they're like having to pick sides and they don't really know what's true or not true. So you can see how like organizationally it just starts to crumble super quickly when that trust isn't built into the foundation.
That makes a lot of sense.
So if you were to walk, and you've done this, right? Like you talked about your time in government and your time in nonprofit. So if you were to walk into an organization brand new and you were sitting at the leadership table and you started to get a sense that there is some deep-seated, unhealthy, unresolved conflict kind of permeating the culture, what do you do?
That's an interesting question if you're coming into it new and you're trying to figure it out. I think that there is a lot of value in building relationships. And as the new person, building them with openness, because you will likely hear from, people as you spend time with them and build relationships, what their take on what is wrong, right? Like if there's a culture issue or an issue with conflict in an organization, it doesn't take very many coffee breaks or, after work drinks to learn what someone feels about the situation.
For sure.
But I think doing it with a level of openness and, building those relationships with a level of openness so that you're not like taking sides or not inadvertently getting involved in the conflict is really important. I think that in a leadership role, it depends on what that role is, but especially when you're starting out, I think there is a substantial amount of value in really engaging with people at a work level and being very careful to not over engage with either your superiors or people that you're supervising, so people that are not on your same level. Engaging with them in a real social aspect, I think there's some danger with that, especially at the beginning when you're just trying to kind of learn the organization. There's a lot of value in keeping those relationships really work focused and work oriented. And I think that can help. But part of it also is time. It's kind of watching and learning and seeing if you can figure out what the heart of the conflict is, what the basis of the conflict is. And then if you can eventually get to the point to identifying what it is, then there's some other things that you can do, right? But that takes some time and, being careful not to take sides or to set the appearance that you're in agreement with one particular person or one particular side, making sure that you're staying open to everything is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I've definitely been in that situation where like it does just take I've been in it professionally, but I've also been in it personally where like it just takes a lot of time for people to get really comfortable getting down into like the nitty-gritty of like what they're seeing. So I feel like sometimes I've experienced this where like you kind of come into a new leadership role and people are like, especially people who are kind of more open or more verbal processors, maybe they're kind of quick to tell you what's going on surface level, but it takes, like you said, that time and repetition. And it also takes you learning them and going like, what's your perspective? Like, like from what lens are you viewing this conflict or this issue? But then it also just takes a level of trust between you and them for them to really start to share maybe some deeper issues that they've been seeing or experiencing.
Yeah, time is really important.
Yeah, for sure. I also think that it's really important to hold on to your, the health that you have in terms of entering into conflict or in terms of addressing issues. So, for example, if passive aggressiveness is what's happening around the leadership table and you can sense that the first meeting you sit down at that table, being really aware that you don't too fall into that trap, right? Like you speak with respect, you speak directly, you kind of approach things a little bit head on, not like a bull in a china shop, but just directly, and not fall into whatever trap that they have fallen into. Stay away from the edge a little bit, because if you get in there with them, you're not gonna make much progress.
But for sure.
I have been told in conversation before something along the lines of, you can't change people's personalities, so you just have to kind of accept how they are. What are your thoughts about that? If, through this lens of unhealthy conflict, like someone says that to you, what is your initial response?
I think that's a really interesting perspective. Like that you can't change people's personalities. It sort of feels like this just is the way it is. We're not willing to change. Like we're not willing to do the work to change what's wrong. Now, at some level, there probably is a little bit of truth to that, especially if you are in a conflict culture that is stemming from mostly one person, or mostly one person has started that wave of the culture. Because if you are anyone else on that team or in that, on that association board or on that church staff, whatever it may be, there is likely room that you're going to be able to logically process how to do conflict well and be able to engage and kind of re-enter and rebuild. But maybe for that one person, it might be that is the case, that they're not able to do that. And then when you're in that spot, it's really hard. One of the things that I think there is a lot of value in teams that have deep-rooted conflict or organizations, I think there's a lot of value in paid mediation. Having someone who is trained in mediation be able to come in, talk with people individually, talk to people with a group, lead conversations to help kind of walk through the conflict.
Yep.
And I think oftentimes when that happens, the people who can logically understand that this, like, we want this to be better, are really able to hold on to that and kind of link arms and move forward. And I think there's a lot of value in outside mediation in teams that have long-standing, deep-rooted conflict.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'm not going to lie to you. The first time that someone said that to me, like, we can't change people's personality, I think I was like in a little bit of shock. And because I was like, hold on a second. Are you telling me that if someone showed up to work in a professional office setting in their pajamas, that we would say, well, they're just super chill people. That's just their personality? No. No, that's not what we would say. So when someone is speaking to another team member, be it their subordinate or their equal, with great disrespect, why do we chalk that up to their personality? Like, no, it's just not professional behavior. I don't like, maybe you're a mean person. Okay, well, deal with that outside of work, sister, because you, like, when you're here, you got to be nice. You got to be respectful. And that sounds really harsh, but I definitely had a few of those moments where I like blinked my eyes really fast, where I'm like, I don't like, okay, your personality, okay, but can we talk about professional behavior? Because this isn't it. And so that like strikes a little bit of a nerve with me, because I've experienced that in the last couple of years, again, both professionally and personal situations where like that has been like one of the things that we kind of hold on to that I feel like allows us to stay underneath the dirt if we're talking about, deep-rooted conflict. I remember being in an organization where at the branch level, our team was so healthy. Like we definitely had situations or staff that weren't the greatest, like we just weren't a good fit for each other. Like that definitely happens. But like, we just didn't allow, there was so much freedom. But with that freedom came great responsibility. And that responsibility was like lined with professionalism. And there was just an expectation, right? Like, I give you a lot of freedom. You do your job really well and you show up every day and act like a professional. And so then to see that happen in different ways or not happen at all, or have different, or like where leaders have different expectations of their team in that fashion, it was really appalling to me. I blinked my eyes really fast.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if we're like legit talking about personality and maybe someone is more direct versus someone who is more subtle or something like that is personality, but that is vastly different than behavior. If you look at all of the personality types, and it's great for teams to do training on that stuff together so they can learn about each other and learn who needs information ahead of time and who's great on the fly, and, be able to learn things about each other's personalities. That's all great. But there is no personality type that it's like, this person is just mean, or this person is just disrespectful. Like this personality type, everyone who's in this personality type is mean.
Right.
No, that's not what personality types are. Like, it's not how that works.
Yes, that is the key. There is a difference between personality and behavior. We can't get the two of those things confused.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, so when unresolved conflict has wreaked havoc in terms of trust on the team, how do you go about rebuilding that trust?
It again, that takes some time, and sometimes that takes a different style of leadership. I think there is a lot of value in using the resources that are available through, human resources, or if there's a training, and then also if there's not, really strongly considering looking at paying someone to come in and work directly with that team to do mediation and to start to rebuild. If it's something that is really long standing and there's nothing that changes, there's no new boss, there is no new pastor, there's no new board member that is going to shake things up. I feel like it's really difficult for a team to climb out of that on their own. You just need some help. There's a lot of value in some training and some support around that to start to rebuild.
For sure. And I think that outside like mediation, that outside support is, I've definitely been in situations, probably both in like a church setting and in a business setting, where it's almost viewed like the world viewed counseling in circa like 2000, where it was like kind of shameful to go to counseling or to need help like that. And I feel like in some ways we have to flip the script on that and say like what great growth and like maturity and vision a team has when they say, we can't do this on our own. This is not like we're not in a healthy spot. And so we can't continue to move forward in a productive and efficient and growth-minded way if we don't get the support that we need to build back the bridges that we've burned. I also think we talked about this with adoptive families, especially families who were adopting older kiddos like out of foster care. We talked about filling the yes bucket, and I have taken that with me in positions and like both professionally and personally ever since my time in that world. But the idea behind that is, and it's probably similar to like parenting a toddler in some ways, where you're like, you don't want every word that comes out of your mouth to be no. And so I remember when I had first taken over as firm administrator, I had a lot of people that reported to me, like I think it was like 25 or something. And it was like the admins, they do so much work, and it's like complicated to get your head around a little bit because there's so much to it. And then it was the leaders, the people who were leading the people. And then it was IT and HR and marketing. And it was like, my head was like in a lot of different directions, right? And so as those people were building, as I was building relationship with them and showing them that they could trust me, any opportunity that I had to tell them yes, I would. Even if it meant a sacrifice for me, more often than not, I would choose to make the sacrifice of the yes to kind of like build that trust. And I think of it like a bubblegum machine, so that when I needed something from them, the bubblegum machine was full. Like I had put a lot of pieces of bubblegum in there, and now I needed to take some out.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's an interesting concept. I was going to ask what the yes bucket was before you started explaining it. I like that.
Yeah. In my mind, it's a bubblegum. It's a bubblegum machine. I also think that sometimes, and I'm kind of the queen of this, I feel like at times, where I can kind of tiptoe around things or like really like talk a lot and make things sound a little bit like fluffy. And I think that when you are in a rebuilding stage, you have to be a little bit willing to kind of like come out and say like this, like these are the issues that we're dealing with. Like, let's just be honest about what's happened. Let's be honest about where we are. Let's be honest about how it's impacted our team, so that through that lens of honesty, we all here acknowledge that this is what's happened and now we're moving forward. And that how that is executed or plays out looks different depending on the scenario and the situation and all of those things. But I think that there does have to be some really clear communication that as a leader, you understand what the issue is and you're committed to, helping to work through it.
I think there's truth in that. The part that gets tricky is when that issue leads back to one individual. I think then that becomes a little more challenging. But I think you can do that in a little bit more of a vague way, to help identify the smaller challenges that are making chaos on a team. I don't know, my experience with one person that is making big waves is somehow the power to control the team in that kind of emotional state to be able to create that conflict and chaos has to be removed, right. Which basically means getting the rest of the team in a healthy spot to be able to deal with conflict with one another and with everyone else in positive, healthy ways and building those relationships.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree with that. Yeah, it's definitely there is definitely a different approach when you're dealing with a singular person, particularly if that person continues to be around and you're navigating the conflict resolution with them there.
Right. Yep.
Yep, for sure. Okay, so final thoughts. How do you keep going when rebuilding a healthy conflict culture gets hard?
I think it is just really picking what the handful of things are that you're really trying to change or that you're really trying to work on. And maybe you pick 2 or 3 of them or even just one of them. So maybe it is, maybe you're in a culture like you talked about where there's a lot of passive aggressiveness. So you are really working at being direct. Or maybe it's a lot of deep-seated conflict because people are doing things without communicating that well to others. And so you're really working to communicate what the pieces are and how they fit together and what everyone's doing. Transparency. You're really working on communication or transparency. Whatever, the 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 things are that are like your big, this is the biggest thing on the team. This is the thing that I'm really working on. It really is just kind of I'm going to focus on doing that, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of how I feel about them, regardless of anything else. I'm going to just kind of keep working on that particular thing or those 2 particular things. And I think that's really important because it can get so discouraging. You're like if it's, communication or transparency, you're like, I'm working so hard at this. And then, something happens and someone does something and doesn't tell you that it's done and everything falls apart again. You're like, seriously, why do I even try? Mm-hmm. And so I think it's important to really identify the key things. And, on a good day, maybe you're working on 8 things, but on the hard days or the hard weeks, it's just that key couple of things that you're really being consistent with.
Yeah, for sure. I really like that. That was the note I made on this thought too. You have to remember what you're working towards. And I think sometimes you have to pause and go let me remember the wins that we've had, no matter how big or small. I have to remember that we are making progress. We are taking strides forward, and the hard work is gonna pay off eventually.
Yeah.
I also think that for me, it was really, really helpful to have one person that I could trust to process through, especially in those moments where things were really hard. It was really helpful for me to have a person that I could trust who, and when I say trust, I mean, like, obviously they would hold my confidence, but also they didn't necessarily add fuel to the fire. Like, they would hear me and they would like empathize with me, but they weren't like, yeah, and like just someone who could hear it and let me process, but then like try to help direct me back to like some actionable steps that would actually lead to change.
I love that. I love that you said that. And I think that is just like a beautiful part of your character in wanting to build leadership skills and build your team. Like, do you know how many people go through their life and never ever get to like what you just said? Like, yeah, they have people that they talk to, but they're the ones who are like, yeah, they did this. Or they have people that they talk to and then they talk to everyone. You know, they have like multiple people and everyone. And like, that's just, that right there is like a key sign of mature leadership. Like if you like look at people who are good leaders, that's where they're going to be. You're a great leader. That's amazing. I love that you said that.
Aw, thanks. That's so sweet. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. This was really fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Are you up for one more episode with us?
Maybe. What's the episode about?
Conflict, of course.
I love talking about conflict.
Me too. This has been good. All right, we'll see you next time.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And that's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Do you have questions, comments, or insights on today's content? I would love to hear from you. You can DM me on Facebook or Instagram, or head over to our website, inspiringheights.org, and click on the Contact Us form. I will link all those locations here in the show notes. P.S. If you haven't already, I would love for you to leave a 5-star rating and a quick review of the podcast. This helps get our content in the hands of new listeners. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter and follow us on social media for rhythmic doses of inspiration. All right, friends, take a deep breath and be inspired where your feet are. Bye for now.